Lydia Clancy, please go now.
Hi, I'm Lydia Clancy. I am also running for the 3-year seat on the school committee. I'm running because I have a daughter at Fowler who went through Green Meadow from kindergarten through 3rd grade. And I would like to have a school system that is successful and thriving so that she can continue through and graduate from Maynard High School. I have spent 5 years volunteering and working in various capacities in a couple of the schools in Green Meadow and the high school. I have spoken with many students. I have spoken with the teachers and gotten to know them. And I have spoken with many parents and community members. I am very in touch with a lot of the struggles, at least in the Green Meadow and at the high school. I'm not as familiar with the issues at Fowler. However, I'm open and willing to talk and get to know various people's stories. I want to run because I want to help facilitate the improvement of our schools in terms of raising our MCAS scores and raising our state rating. Right now, we are declining, and it is not helping our students, it's not helping our property taxes, and it's a sign that there are deficits in the way our schools are being run, and we need a change, and we need a new voice on the school committee so that we can take in new perspectives and we can offer a proper education for every child in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Natasha.
Hi, I'm Natasha Rivera, and I'm running for the 1-year seat on the Maynard School Committee. And first I wanted to thank the many local businesses and groups, all individuals that have supported all candidates through this election season. It's been a tough one, but it's been great to see the engagement, so thank you all. Having 2 kids in our school system in 2nd and 5th grade, I am aware of the many challenges and successes that we feel in our district. Professionally, I have over 20 years of customer relations experience. 10 of those years are targeted with compliance with federal regulations. And while I'd like to take those skills and functions and apply them to support our school district and improve wherever possible. Aside from just election time, I actively worked and engaged with all stakeholders to remain informed and to formulate plans to address and understand the concerns affecting our schools. This engagement has been through participating on the Green Meadow School Council for 4 years, spearheading the institution of the online annual parent survey, participating on the district's communication task force, being a CPAC board member, and through just regular engagement and meetings with parents one-on-one. I actively seek to listen and to hear all the perspectives that we have in our town. And I know this hearing visions that are different than mine are what we should be encouraging for any of our elected officials. It challenges us to improve our processes, to think outside the box, and makes our district better as a whole. I look forward to engaging collaboratively with all stakeholders to be part of a solution, and we need to reinforce a continuous atmosphere where parents feel heard, transparency is felt, trust flourishes, and collaboration is expected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mara.
Good evening. My name is Mara Hogan, and I'm running for the 1-year seat that I was appointed to fill last July. Before July, I had been on the Green Meadow and Fowler School Councils, part of the Global Competency Task Force, and was involved with a couple of parent groups with issues brought to the administration. I have 3 boys, 1 at the high school and 2 at Fowler. I think it's very important to have representation on the school committee for all 3 schools in our district. I am the only member and candidate that has a student at the high school. Since my appointment, I have been working with the administration to put in place communication standards. I'm in the newly created co-liaison CPAC role. I'm heading up a new evaluation process for the superintendent, and I've been collaborating on both the policy and curriculum subcommittees. In addition to what I've already been working on, I'd like to collaborate on the long-term goals of our district, work with the administration and community to make sure our school district is providing the best curriculum for each and every student, which will also ensure that we keep our students in our district. Put in place a better administration evaluation, which includes teacher input, and collaborate with all the different constituents in town to work towards a fiscally conservative budget. I'd also like to look into teacher retention, ways to bring up the MPAS course, help parents understand the IEP process, help struggling students that aren't on an IEP or 504, and make sure we have a good plan in place for maintenance of all our facilities. I look forward to working with all of you on these goals. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll start our first question with Lydia. What do you consider to be the root causes of the Green Meadows health and building woes, and how would you rectify them?
What I consider to be the root causes are lack of communication, mismanagement of the building itself, and deferred maintenance. There are known issues with the roof that we have been aware of for years. And instead of dealing with the issue head on to mitigate any damage to the inside of the building, we just patched and let it go and let it go and let it go. That's
For how that was going to work. So, for instance, if something was broken, there was nowhere, people didn't know, teachers didn't know where to go. Principal would pass it along, but whose job is it, really? So, one of the things that is happening right now is we're working on contracts with the custodians and facilities to put in place those processes for it. The other thing is we put in place the Green Meadow Futures Committee, which has really helped us a lot with figuring out what needs to be done right now for Green Meadow, and then also the plan going forward. And I think that that would really help us figure out more of a plan for the future and whether or not we need to replace the building. But in the meantime, before we can even replace the building, we need to fix the building, which would include a new roof and other things. So with the new roof, we need to figure out how we're going to pay for that, not just as a district, but as a whole town. And it's very expensive, so we need to possibly break it up into phases. Thank you.
I'm horrified by what we found at Green Meadow, and I'm horrified by a few different things. I'm horrified by the people who've been talking about this and complaining about this for years and have been brushed aside. They have felt unheard. I'm horrified by what we found in the building. It's primarily the result of proactive maintenance, regular taking out the trash and changing air filters and vacuuming and cleaning and the things that need to happen on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. So I think the root cause of all of these things, there's a couple pieces that we need to look at, and I look forward to being a part of a post-mortem process as we move past the initial crisis and figure out, how did this happen and how do we prevent it from happening in the future. But there's a couple of pieces that some of which have already been mentioned. There's not this clear chain of command. There's not a clear who's overseeing our custodians, who's ensuring that the regular maintenance is getting done. Where do people go with maintenance complaints, everything from a light bulb being out to trash not being removed to you know, the air quality doesn't smell or feel like what it should be in a healthy school building. So that's one piece of it. We have one facilities director for 15 buildings in a small town. That should be enough, but we need to make sure that we have the structures in place so that that facilities director has regular oversight of what's happening in our school buildings. We have the custodians. There has never been, I looked into this, there hasn't been a maintenance request that's been denied, for a lack of funding. So we have the resources in place. We're just not holding people accountable. We're just not doing the regular work that needs to be done. So we need to put those structures in place, make sure that we have the oversight and accountability, and make sure that we have healthy and safe schools in place for our kids.
Thank you. Next question from Natasha. How will you work collaboratively with the current superintendent in a productive way to meet the needs of the Maynard schools?
So the school committee's role for the superintendent is that of an employer-employee role relationship. And that requires accountability. It requires setting clear goals that are measurable, that are data-driven. It requires ongoing check-ins to ensure that those goals are being met. It requires a lot of communication with various stakeholders in our community to ensure that the information that is being formulated to address or to support the goals is good data. Part of any relationship from an employer-employee requires just communication. You know, as a district, we talk regularly about how we're improving communication, yet I have not seen a very clear communication long-term plan on how we're doing that. Right now, that is a goal, and this is for the superintendent's evaluation, but some of the measurable data that is being attributed to meeting that is posting communications on the website, and I don't feel that's really robust enough to say that I'm meeting my communication goal. So accountability is something that is necessary in any type of employer-employee relationship. Getting feedback beyond just the superintendent is necessary. So that can be done through surveys, engagement surveys with teachers, with students, with parents. That needs to be data that the school committee seeks out annually and uses to better measure if certain expectations or goals are being achieved. So that's pretty much it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mara?
Since I came on to the school committee last July, one of the very first things that I started working with a superintendent on was communication. We started with kind of a checklist on how to, what things that should be in communication. Making sure that all the information that you have is sent out to the different constituents. And there have been some improvements, but certainly we need more. And I think that heading up the evaluation goals for our superintendent, which will then trickle down to the rest of the district on ways to improve communication, ways to improve the way that we do curriculum or any other things that happen in our district is very important. And we're constantly striving to do that. And I know it seems like we really dropped the ball with the way things happened this year, but I really was working very hard to make sure that we were getting out all the information that we could at the time that we had it. So working with the superintendent and going forward, overseeing how that all works is one of my main goals.
Leslie? work collaboratively with the current superintendent in a productive way to meet the needs of the Maynard schools?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what's been said, that it is an employee-employer relationship. We also need to use the superintendent evaluation rubric effectively. That is very similar to the rubric that I have used in coaching and evaluating teachers. It's the one by which I was evaluated as an administrator, and it's what we need to use in working with our superintendent. It very clearly outlines, these are the things that you need to do as a superintendent in schools. This is what it takes to be a proficient or an exemplary superintendent. And I've looked back at some of the evaluations our school committee has written, and it hasn't been used effectively. So we need to use that as both a coaching tool and as a tool to say, this is what we need in our community, this is what we're going to hold you accountable to, and then use that as an evaluation tool as needed if we're not getting the results that we want. I also have looked back. I know our current town administrator gives an accounting every 2 weeks of what he's done since the last Board of Selectmen meeting. I would love to see our superintendent doing that, particularly right now where we don't feel like we have the trust in him and what he's doing. I would love to know, what is he doing every 2 weeks at a school committee meeting? I love regular updating about our goals and our progress towards our goals. I've looked at our state accountability data, and it's not great, and I want to know, what is he doing on a regular monthly, quarterly basis to improve some of those data points and to address some of the issues that we have in terms of academics in our schools. So I've done those things before with teachers, and I look forward to being able to do that with the superintendent here.
So let's face it, he has raised not doing his job to a high art form. And part of that falls on the school committee, and I think one of the things that we take for granted is that we are just common citizens who are volunteering our time, and we get on a board and we don't necessarily know what we're in for, and we don't necessarily know what our responsibilities are. And I think first and foremost, if we're going to hold someone else accountable, we need to hold ourselves accountable first. And we need to utilize the Massachusetts Association of School Committee as a resource, and we need to learn what our responsibilities are as school committee members. We need to know where our control and power ends and where the superintendent's begins. We need to not allow him to push school committee members around and tell them, oh, that's not your job, that's my job, and forbidding them from getting involved in areas where they should, or having them involved in areas where they shouldn't be. I think that once the school committee has a clear vision of what their roles are and their obligations and responsibilities, they can then more clearly define what the superintendent's roles and responsibilities are and set up SMART goals for him that he must be held to and must support the vision and direction that we want the education of our children to go in. Thank you.
Okay, next question starts with Mara. What are Maynard schools' greatest strengths and what are their weaknesses?
I think for strengths, we have fantastic teachers, and they do so much for our children, from teaching them the regular core, along with all the little things that they do, supporting our children and really loving them. So that is I feel like our biggest thing is how much our teachers are just so fantastic. We have some really great programs, WAVM, the OASIS program, all our fantastic specials, Spanish immersion, and just how kind of robust in such a small town that we have. Weaknesses, I think our biggest weakness is the communication that we have right now and the lack of trust, and how to build that back up. I think that we have work to do on that. And then we also have some issues with special education that needs to be addressed, and how we can help parents and students all together working towards a better district so that we can have a really fantastic learning environment for our children.
Leslie?
I agree with a lot of what was just been said as far as our strengths. We have some passionate teachers who really care about our kids. We clearly have community investment in our schools, as we see by the people here, the people who turned out to donate materials to Green Meadow when there was a lot lost in the preschool and kindergarten wing. We know we all care about our kids, and we care about high quality education for all of our kids. And we have some fantastic programming that's really creative on, in a small town, with small town resources and a small town budget. We've been able to do some things that has actually made us the envy of other towns in the area, some of which were just listed. Our biggest weaknesses, or I should say our biggest areas for growth right now, is that we don't have a plan. I don't see that as a weakness, I see it as something that we need to fix. We don't have that roadmap that's going to say, here's our vision for where we want to be 5 or 10 years from now, and here's the steps that we're going to take to get us there. It's that lack of a plan that leads to us feeling like we're reacting to different situations. It leads to, we have these different initiatives that feel like they don't have a full rollout associated with them, and there's not the follow through, and we haven't thought through all the implications of all of them and addressed those ahead of time, and instead we're reacting to situations. That's the biggest thing that I want to see our superintendent address and come up with that proactive strategic plan. Another big issue that I've seen is really that we are at the bottom of our cohort if we look at our students' performance on MCAS scores. Now, there's a lot of problems with MCAS. We don't have time to go into that now. But it is an indication of how our students are doing compared to state standards. We have every reason to be at the top. We have every reason to believe that we can be the best small district in Massachusetts, and right now we're not. So that is something I wanted us to address, in addition to the communication and the trust and the transparency that was already addressed. Those are also critical to moving forward.
Thank you. Lydia?
Our greatest strengths, I'm going to echo our teachers. One of the weaknesses is that I don't believe they receive the respect that they deserve, nor the support, and I think they are wholly underutilized in determining our curriculums in the various buildings when it comes to vertical alignment and horizontal alignment. We have some fabulous facilities which are also underutilized, and some of which have been completely abandoned, like the STEM workshop at the high school, which a few years ago was a thriving classroom and now pretty much sits empty. And I've spoken with high school students who really were disappointed when that program was dissolved. Another one of our great strengths is the community. We have a really healthy, involved, enthusiastic group of people that we live next to and we work with, and parents and grandparents and teachers, and everyone wants to be involved and wants to help. And our weakness is that we do not collaborate enough. We need to collaborate more. We need more voices in the conversation, and we need new and different perspectives on how to find solutions. Another great thing is that as a district, we're open to innovation and out-of-the-box thinking, which is fabulous. The problem is that a lot of time, these initiatives are hastily implemented, or a proper foundation is not built, and so then they fail, or they are weak at best, and we're left playing catch-up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Natasha?
Yeah, I didn't answer that. Yeah. So I think the strengths, as you know, everyone has mentioned already, would be teachers. I think we have fantastic, I know we have fantastic teachers, staff, we have the WABM, we have parent volunteers at all corners and ready to step in and help wherever needed. We have a fantastic arts and music program. We have a small town, so it really lends to kids being able to participate in more things than compared to a larger district. The weaknesses, lack of communication clearly is an issue, and a lack of long-term planning on how we're going to be addressing that. Lack of confidence. You know, we have 2 unions that have expressed a lack of confidence in our leadership. So I think that is something that has yet to be addressed fully. And I think, you know, how do we move forward, and how do we have a plan that we can move forward when we have 2 unions that have clearly no confidence in the leadership that they have right now. We have a lack of data-driven decision-making. You know, we have students who are leaving district for various reasons, but we have a really poor exit interview process to collect data on the root cause of why they're leaving. I've spoken with families who said, oh, I've gotten a phone call, they were supposed to send me an interview, but I never received it. So if we don't have the data on why people are leaving, how can we make plans to improve to keep them in Maynard? We have a breakdown in utilizing the school councils at each school. Those are 3 robust collaborative bodies, Green Meadow, Fowler, and the high school, and there is no reporting out to the school committee to utilize those bodies in an effective manner. They're made up of parents, teachers, and administrators. So that's a breakdown. I could go a little bit on, but my time's up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So going back to Leslie. The Maynard Public School budget has not even kept up with level funding each year. Why is funding going down, and what will you do to address that challenge?
So funding is going down for a wide variety of reasons. We have lots of big drivers of our budget for the school. So things like salaries and health insurance costs and out-of-district placements and special education costs, those all drive up the costs of running a school district every year. And unfortunately, the money that we are getting from the town is not keeping pace with that. It's not only from the town, but I would also say from the state. So our foundation budget formula, the formula that the state uses to determine how much aid goes to towns for their schools, has also not kept pace with the increases in costs. So those are some issues that we have. We've been advocating, our school committee has been advocating at the state level for changes to that foundation formula that we need to see happen. Unfortunately, some changes that will benefit bigger cities aren't the same changes that are going to benefit smaller micro-urban districts like Maynard, which are different from the changes we need for rural districts. So there's a lot of negotiating that happens in that process. The other piece that we have more control over here in Maynard is we need to look at our revenue sources. And we need our superintendent and our school committee to be leading the charge, I shouldn't say leading the charge, but working with the town, I guess, to lead the charge. And how do we increase our revenue sources in this town? How do we make sure that we have the money that we need to build a fire station, to maintain our roads, to have the water resources we need in town, and to have the high quality education and the facilities that we need for that education in our town?
Thank you. Lydia?
All of that is very true, and it's difficult when you have a limited pool of resources. And we unfortunately have a very small town land-wise and not a lot of ways to increase our revenue at this time. There has been a lot of discussion of 129 Parker and Mill and Main, and then the upcoming marijuana businesses that will be moving in, but that still, we can't put all of our eggs in one basket and expect those to solve our monetary problems. So we need to be more fiscally responsible within the schools. We need to stop trying to be something we're not. We need to look at and take an inventory of the resources and the strengths that we have and utilize those to the maximum rather than trying to introduce new programs or new initiatives that are flashy and look good but aren't necessarily increasing the substance of our education. We need to follow best practices. And again, as she said, data-driven suggestions and research, and not just assume that something that another district is doing would also work in our district just because it looks good and we can make it work without the proper homework and background. Thank you.
Natasha?
Can you repeat the question again?
The Maynard Public Schools budget has not even kept up. The Maynard Public Schools budget has not even kept up with level funding each year. Why is funding going down, and what will you do to address this challenge?
So the funding is going down for a variety of reasons, mainly because of the state formula that is clearly outdated and needs to be revised. There are active conversations at the state level on how to best address that. There are different pieces of legislation that are being discussed. The Promise Act is one that does address costs relating to out-of-district or charter schools that might help schools recoup some of those expenses. I don't think there's a one fix to address that. I think from an expense perspective, you need to look at what we're spending our money on. So out-of-district is clearly one significant piece, but we don't have a lot of data to understand why. So that really is one area we need to have the data to understand why people are leaving. We need to have a plan based on that data to formulate how to address it. From a special education perspective, I know that is a huge cost in our town, and so we need to think long-term planning for special education goals. Is there interventions that can be applied or done at the lower grades that will be less costly as opposed to a child falling behind and now requiring services that can no longer be provided at Maynard at a private institution that could be tuition for $70,000 to $90,000 possibly for one child. So there's a lot of broad conversations on that. Revenue for our town is critical. So supporting these things and exploring, I think the school committee needs to really work collaboratively. And I know there were conversations from the Maynard Business Alliance about how to do that. And a lot of it was just about communicating with the different committees. So we need to communicate better to know how we can plan for our future.
Thank you. Laura?
With the level of funding that we need for our schools and the lack of that we're able to get, obviously that means that we have to cut. And in doing that, we need to really figure out and have lots of conversations. So over the last couple of years, we have worked 2 members from the school committee, 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, and 2 members of FinCom. We have this tri-board now that get together periodically throughout the whole year, not just during the budget season, to discuss and talk about what budgeting we have, how much money we have, and how much we can use for each of our different parts of our town, police, fire, DPW, and schools. And they're all talking all year round. And in doing that, I think that it's really helped a lot with each of those boards knowing kind of where we're at. But more can be done to do that, to keep all the communication open and honest and transparent. One of the things that the school committee is doing is 2 of us are going this Wednesday to a Day on the Hill, and that's to discuss in a kind of board about the foundation budget.
Thank you. Leslie? Which? Huh? So that was, so you started off that, that's right, I'm sorry. Yes, and I have it marked here too. Sorry about that. Which Green Meadow Future Committee recommendations would you implement and how would you fund them? What would you do to ensure that the other 2 schools also receive adequate maintenance?
That is a fabulous and really difficult question to answer. And it's not that I haven't thought of it, I just haven't come up with a good answer to it. So the Green Meadow Future Committee has had some fabulous insights into the issues of the building. I am so impressed by what they have done so far, and I'm not just blowing smoke. I mean, seriously, I have been in the Green Meadow building for years. The teachers have been bringing it to the attention of the administration for years. The issues have been there, and finally, it's being addressed. Finally, they're being heard, and finally, we're starting to see that there are solutions to the issues and we don't have to just scrap the entire building and start over. So, that being said, it does require a lot of work. And the first and most significant improvement and recommendation that they have given is we need to replace the roof, and that's just all there is to it. It is beyond repair at this point. It has served its life twice and not very well. It is failing in many different areas for many different reasons, and at this point it is not only a money drain, but it is also a liability. So we need to fix it. We need to figure out how we're going to fund that. And if that means we've got to cut back on some of the special initiatives that we have implemented in the schools, then we're going to have to do it. And it's going to be painful. But sometimes hard choices are. Thank you.
Natasha?
So the Green Meadow Future Committee has been doing a fantastic job, and I think this want to take this opportunity to really thank them publicly for the efforts that they've done. It's been amazing. So part of the recommendations that they've decided is to recommend a $50,000 survey of the building envelope that will address the outer structure of how do we plan for what needs to happen. And a couple of things that were highlighted through their various inspections were the intake for Green Meadow, how it has greenery growing right there. There's not appropriate filtering that goes into the boiler room, then that air gets circulated throughout the building. There's air filters that are not fitting or not appropriately sized for appropriate air quality circulation. There is a whole range of things that really were, some of them are minor, it just would be maintenance, but you need to have training, or the custodians need training and oversight so that we ensure that those type of maintenance schedules are being done. So the MOU that is being crafted will help empower the principal and the DPW so that those type of oversight we can make sure that they're happening. There was mention about the air handler at Green Meadow and how it's really reaching its end of life, and that would probably be a capital planning project. So I'd like to have a better understanding of our planning efforts relating to that. And how we can prevent this from happening at other schools is create similar boards at each school. We've invested millions of dollars in the high school. Let's maintain our investment. Let's make sure that we're taking care of it. So that needs to be something that we do on a regular basis so we're not in the same situation again.
Thank you. Maynard.
I think that the first thing that kind of, when I read over the report that the Green Meadow Futures Committee put out last week or the week before was the how dirty the air filters or the univents are, how they've not been cleaned in who knows how long. And how also, as what was mentioned, how the filters don't fit in the majority of the air vents. And I think that at least for the air quality portion of it, we need to really make sure that all of those things are being done on a regular basis. And that's one of the things that is going to be happening over the next couple months is the cleaning of those, and then also putting in place the maintenance. We've put in place a thing called School Dude, where teachers and administrators can put in what needs to be done, and that those things will then go through this app and notify the facilities, and then we'll be able to track who's done things and who hasn't. And I think it'll be really good to have all that in place and be able to do that for all 3 of our schools, not just Green Meadow. The other thing is that we've also planned on putting in place futures committees for not only Green Meadow, but also for Fowler and the high school, so we can make sure that this doesn't happen to any other schools.
Thank you. Leslie?
Take out the trash. I mean, some of the problems that we have at Green Meadow come from food trash was sitting out all during April vacation. Is it any wonder that we have rodents and pests in the building? I mean, so it is the regular maintenance that has been mentioned that needs to happen. I would love to see those committees set up at Fowler and the high school as well, so that we have people making some proactive plans for how do we maintain our facilities, how do we make sure that they're safe and healthy and in good working condition. But we also need to just be walking the buildings on a regular basis. We have a principal for leadership and operations at each one of our 3 schools, and a part of their job is making sure that we're overseeing the facilities. They need to be walking the facilities, and they need to be doing that with our assistant facilities director at the town, someone who has the expertise in facilities maintenance and management. So they are proactively looking for problems and also following up on our custodial staff to make sure that the regular maintenance that should be happening in those buildings is happening daily, weekly, quarterly, monthly. I look forward to working collaboratively with the town to figure out where do we find the $50,000 that we're going to need to fully evaluate the building envelope at Green Meadow. That's going to tell us a lot about our next steps as far as the school building authority process and what do we need to do with our building. What are the ways that we can keep it working in the future if necessary? How are we going to find the funding for a roof that we're going to need to even be in the building for the next 6 years? So we need to work collaboratively with the town to find the funding for those projects. I think we have a lot that's already headed in the right direction with School Dude, with this memorandum of understanding so we know who's responsible for what in the school buildings, but we need to take a more proactive approach to our facilities.
Thank you. Next question to Natasha. Okay. Each of you has advocated for healing the divide that our community has struggled with over the last several months. If you are not elected, how will you contribute?
So,
I will write them. Each of you has advocated for healing the divide that that our community has struggled with over the last several months. If you are not elected, how will you contribute?
So I will contribute just as I've been doing up until this point. I will continue to go to school committee meetings. I will continue to ask questions where I feel like we need more information. I will continue on the Green Meadow School Council. I will continue to engage and advocate for teachers and families and students. I will always try to have an understanding of, asking or how we can go forward. And part of that is, we can challenge our elected official. It's not a bad thing. And somehow through this election process, it's been unclear on what is appropriate and what is not. And it's okay to ask your elected officials questions to get a better understanding. That's part of what a democracy is. And I would do that to my school committee if I'm not elected, and I would expect that of me if I am elected. So I think that provokes healthy conversation. That's how we improve as a district, to hear each other, to try to listen as much as we speak, and just to continuously promote those healthy conversations that need to happen on an ongoing basis. We don't just do it one moment and stop. It needs to be ongoing. It needs to be regularly occurring. And we don't need to shy away from it because maybe it's uncomfortable at one point. It's okay to be uncomfortable as long as we're respectful to each other. We're all Maynard, and we all are neighbors and community members. So after this election, we're still going to go back to those roles. And I would certainly want to leverage our community members and so many advocates that we have in our town to make those improvements and find ways how we can go forward. Attend meetings. That's the other thing too. We need to get our community engaged and regularly attending and providing feedback on an ongoing basis and how we can plan for our town. So that's what I would do.
Okay, thank you. Myra?
So before I was on the school committee, I was part of the Green Meadow and Fowler School Councils. Going forward, if I do not get elected again, I will switch to the Fowler and the high schools, because that's where my children are, and advocate there, working with the principals and the other members of those committees to improve our schools and making sure that we're being heard by going to school committee meetings, working with those members, along with working with the superintendent. I've had a very good relationship with the superintendent going back even before the being on the school committee, and knowing that I can go to him for any issues that parents have brought to me, whether it be the elimination of middle school sports, or issues with parents with a specific teacher, or Spanish immersion, special education. And I think that going forward, I'm still here to, talk to anybody that needs help. And I'm happy to bring those issues to whoever might be the best avenue to get something done.
Leslie?
Before I started working in public education, I actually worked as a grassroots organizer and advocate, because I really believe strongly in the need to get people together and in the power of our collective voice. So that's something that I've done throughout my life, and it's something that I'll continue to do. Over the last couple of months, I've reached out to so many different groups in town. The Friends of Maynard Seniors, the Maynard Business Alliance, the PTOs of the different schools, and I recognize everyone has a different perspective and a different expertise and a different story to lend, and we need to put that to work in our school district. I was a part of a communications task force that was pretty short-lived in the district. I would love to see something like that restarted, where we have that place where we can gather all those different perspectives, because everybody in town cares about our schools. So we need to bring all of those voices together, and if I can be a part of making that happen and using my skills as an organizer, I would love to be able to do that. I participated in the past in the Green Meadow School Council. I would love to either do that or participate in the Fowler School Council. I've been a part of hiring committees here in the town, or the screening committees for hiring some of our administrators that we have, both at Fowler and at Green Meadow. So I have an expertise while I'm working in public education. I've been a resource to friends and neighbors, being able to offer that expertise. And having spent this time really digging into what's happening here in Maynard, I have an even more in-depth knowledge about things specific to Maynard that I want to continue to give back to the community.
If I am not elected to the school committee, I plan, much like Natasha, to just continue doing what I have been doing, which is volunteering at the schools. And I am on the Fowler School Council. I will continue to contribute to that. I will continue to engage in conversation in the community and stir interest in the issues that face us and get people involved. I was really disappointed in the response of a lot of my friends when the issues with the mold first came out last fall. And some of them flat out said, I don't want to know because I don't want to have to deal with it. That attitude has to stop. We all need to know and we all need to deal with it, because if we don't all work together, we're not going to get anywhere. Another thing that I have pledged to Bethlyn, even if I do not get on the school committee, is to help her bring back and reintroduce Nature's Classroom in the Green Meadow School. I was very disheartened to hear that that was cut. Not completely, but it was definitely cut back. It is no longer a curriculum that is woven throughout the grades and throughout the subjects. They still have their special units of going and visiting the vernal pool, but it is not something that is included in every aspect of their second grade year. They still get to dissect owl poop, but they don't necessarily get to learn about all various birds and raptors and whatnot. So I would continue to participate and attend the school committee meetings and just go forward with what I've been doing for the past 5 years.
Okay, next question is for Mauro. Can you give us the pros and cons, and do you support the two-principal model?
So for those of you that don't know what the dual principal model is, each of our schools have two principals. One is the principal of leadership and operations. They mostly deal with building issues and student discipline. And the second principal is for curriculum, instruction and assessment. And they focus on the curriculum of the school, teacher evaluations, and teacher support. We started this model a couple of years ago, mainly because of some budget cuts. That's how it kind of evolved into the dual principal model. We decided that since we're a small district, we would break up the principal and the vice principal into two principals, mainly so that we could focus on teacher evaluations and teacher support, because we felt like that was really lacking. So the plan from that was to then see how that works. This past year is the first year that we've really had all three schools under that model. And we have, from that, we need to really look at the data. We've had some really great success at Fowler, and probably not, some semi-success at the high school and not great success at Green Meadow. And I think that going forward, looking at the data to see whether or not this is the model for our town is where we really need to see, and we just haven't gotten there yet.
Thank you.
So 2 years ago, we had 1.5 administrators at Green Meadow and at Fowler due to budget cuts, and that didn't work. So we know we need 2 administrators in every building. When we had a 12-month principal and a 10-month assistant principal, our average administrator salary was about $110,000. Now with the 2 year-round principals, it's about $113,000 on average. So we are spending a little bit of additional money to have these 2 principals. However, we have a clear division of labor. I've talked to some of the principals and they really like the model. Some of the early data, as was mentioned, that's coming out of Fowler is really positive. Teachers feel supported. They feel like they know where to go, to which administrator they need to go when they have a question or a concern. So those are some of the positives. And for slightly additional money, we have 2 administrators in the building year-round, working year-round on school improvement, on responsiveness to parents, and the things that need to be happening in July and August, even when the students aren't in the building. So I see that as a positive. We have some early data that show that it's working, but we don't have complete data from all 3 buildings. So we certainly need to give it a couple of years. We need to give it some time. We need to look at what were the goals that were laid out for this system, make sure we're collecting the data that's going to give us information about those goals, and then make a full assessment after we've given it a couple of years to work. Some of the cons that I see, in addition to the very slightly increased cost, is it's not communicated well to parents. And so while teachers and other people in the schools feel like they know why we have these 2 principals and what the roles are, certainly community members and parents don't, and let's face it, it's weird. I've never heard it anywhere else. But there needs to be more education for our community members so that we all understand why we have this model and whether it's working in our schools.
I wholeheartedly disagree. I do not support the dual principal model. I think that it was a blunder in judgment. I think that it is far more expensive than we are led to believe. I have gone through the payroll stats for the past, I think going back to 2014, 2013, and it absolutely costs us more money. So, that being said, if we do want to continue with it, then, and in each building we have a principal who is in charge of curriculum instruction and assessment, then we no longer need a director of curriculum, which means that we can eliminate that position and save her salary, which can then cover the cost of the dual principal model. I do not understand why having a principal and a vice principal at each school is not sufficient. It has worked in the past. Part of the issue with the vice principal model at Green Meadow previously was that Deb Bresnick was part-time. She got paid, I believe, $45,000 a year, and she was there part-time. We had behavioral issues due to the fact that we didn't have someone there on a consistent basis to deal with these kids, and the teachers were not empowered to deal with them. We also had a weak principal at Fowler who didn't handle bullying issues properly. Part of why the dual model principal works at Fowler and didn't work at Green Meadow is simply the candidates and the personalities. If we hire the right people, they'll do the right job. We just have to be better about hiring.
Okay, thank you, Natasha.
So I haven't really seen data to understand the effectiveness of the 2 principal model. I feel that the success that we've seen at Fowler is specific to the individuals. It's not specific to the model. And I think that we should not be framing policy on hiring practice because we have poor folks in certain roles. That is really something that we can solve through accountability and performance evaluations. We don't change our school model to fit the person. We find a person who fits our school model. So I think that part of what I would like to see is the data, and I know this was asked recently at the last school committee meeting, about, because we do it, Green Meadow has an opening now. So it was stated that, yes, they will continue with the two principal model, and Dawn said that she would share data on the success of that model. So I'd be curious to see that data. I know what has been, in its implementation, it was stated that it would be a cost savings to the town because one principal would be 10 months and one principal would be 12 months. Now, I do agree that having two administrators is better for us as a town, whether that's a principal and a vice principal, I don't know. I don't know why we can't solve that with just a vice principal model. So without having information, I feel like it's hard to make these decisions, or I'll question why we are making these decisions. Some of the things that Dr. Girardi has mentioned is because, you have one person who's able to be out waving with parents, and that's fantastic. I don't think that that is something I would use as a data point to base a change in our model. I do think it's important that we do have curriculum oversight, and so those are all very critical things that we need to solve for. But I just don't know if this is the right model, and I think we need to better assess that with the data.
Thank you. Next question.
Is it,
I was the last one that had the last question.
okay.
Right, so the next question will be Leslie. How will you encourage your peers on the school committee to ask difficult questions? How will you break the group mindset and encourage dialogue within the school committee?
Yeah, when we go to school committee meetings, it often does look like people are all on the same page and the decision's already been made before it's actually been discussed in open meeting. And I don't mean to say that they are violating open meeting law by any stretch of the imagination, but it does appear that there is this groupthink. We need someone on our school committee who knows how schools work, who knows what the data is that we need to be looking at, who knows the questions that we need to be asking of our administrators to get the results that we want. And I've talked to several members of the school committee. They're looking for someone with that expertise. So we have the Massachusetts Association of School Committees that we can turn to for some guidance. But we need someone on that school committee who actually gets how schools work, who's actually worked in the system in the past, and knows how to look at the data, knows what are the critical points that we should be looking at, and knows how to then turn that into questions that we can ask our administrators and then hold them accountable to that data. So because I'm coming in with that expertise and that experience, I have a skill set to lend on the committee that people will be looking for. But I think it's incumbent on everybody on any committee to be critical, to ask critical questions. I think it's also important sometimes in a public forum to appear to be presenting a united front. So it's about working collaboratively, it's about sharing our experiences and our expertise, it's about sharing what we know about the data, but then also coming to decisions that we really feel best benefit the town and the schools.
I've been asked this question before, and I think one of the primary ways I will be able to encourage the difficult questions and break the group mindset is just by speaking out and asking the questions and modeling the behavior and being an individual voice. And to a certain degree, that can often empower other individuals in a group to then follow suit. And it doesn't mean that they will then mimic what I say, but then they will feel confident in their own, expressing their own values and their own opinions and perspectives. I understand where the value is in having an educator with experience on a school committee, but I also understand that and truly believe that we are getting enough input from formal institutionalized perspective, meaning from the administration and from the principals and from the teachers and the state. We need parents, we need input from the community, we need basic in the trenches perspectives of what our children go through on a daily basis, what our teachers struggle with and need support with. And we need to approach it from bottom up sometimes and not top down. I worked in retail for a long time, and as a salesperson, often corporate would dictate things to us that were completely unreasonable.
Natasha?
So I expect when I go to a school committee meeting to see deliberation between the members of whatever is being presented. I want to see them asking questions. There's been many times that I've attended before this election season where there's some members who haven't said a word sometimes. And that to me is not, fulfilling your duty as a elected school committee member. So someone recently mentioned at the round table about the idea of groupthink. And it is a psychological phenomenon where a group of like-minded individuals make decisions that are kind of consistently in sync with each other. And it was thought-provoking to me, and I looked into it a little bit. And one of the things that was suggested is that maybe have someone play on the committee the devil's advocate role, where you have someone who is going to be asking the opposite questions to provoke some thought and understanding of getting information. And so I think we need to be creative in that respect to ensure that we are, exhibiting the behavior of a school committee that we would want people to know that we're fulfilling our job and we're asking the tough questions that we need to in a respectful way, but its intent is to improve our school district. I would also say that, as someone who's a CPAC board member, you need to be able to speak to your area that you have knowledge on. Right now, we've had school committee members that, have special education background, but I've yet to see a really strong encouragement of special education programs or conversations that have happened at the school committee meetings. So, anyway, that's what I would do.
Thank you. Maynard?
So I had heard about some of the questions that were posed at the candidates' night last week, and this was one of them. I have to say, it took me back that our meetings were considered in that light. And so I have to say, I don't see it. I haven't seen it in that way, but I can see how it can be perceived in that way. So going forward, I can tell you that I will be more involved in making sure that there are opposite views that are going to be talked about, and that we will, or I will, I can't talk about the other three members of the committee right now, but I can tell you that I will be talking in our meetings to make sure that people realize that we are all working together, trying to work together and collaborate together, but so that our whole community can see that we're trying to be transparent, because I know that is very, very important to our whole district and our whole community. Thank you.
Okay, so this will probably be the last question, and it's going to go to Lydia first. Envision yourself as the first meeting after the election. What discussion topics do you want to see on the agenda?
First, I think that what would need to be discussed is roles and expectations. In terms of topics on the agenda that would appeal to the general public, I know that people are always looking for an update on what is happening with Green Meadow, and we absolutely need to provide a plan for the construction that is going to continue to happen, or the remodeling that is going to happen over the summer. There are a lot of very concerned parents about sending their kids to excel in that building this summer, and many teachers are also concerned that the work is not going to be done in time for them to set their classrooms up prior to September and prior to the beginning of school. So that is a topic that needs to be addressed on the agenda. I think that another thing that needs to be addressed is how are we going to do the budget differently next year, and where are our priorities going to lay? And I think we also need to discuss how we can move forward with the current superintendent. If he is still with us, I don't know how much of a public conversation that can be, but I think that it needs to happen. There needs to be more transparency in how the school committee views and intends to utilize the superintendent, because right now, I think a lot of people have a lot of questions.
Thank you. Natasha?
So I'd like to see some conversations on the first agenda about subcommittees that are going to be formed for the year, what those would be. Are there going to be subcommittees that the school committee can have that will address the issues that we're having? So right now we have the Green Meadow Future Committee. What about communication? You know, how are we going to address some of the really deep issues that we have along that line? At some point, and I don't know this happens around that time, is the evaluation of the superintendent. So I would like to get, if it hasn't happened already, get a better understanding of where we are in that process. Or are we in the process of having a new superintendent? I mean, a lot of things are still unknown. The Green Meadow building itself should be a standing item on any agenda. Right now, we have a lot of things that are just reoccurring or surfacing each week with the future committee, and we need to understand, especially at that critical time, you know, where we are with finances, what kind of long-term planning are we putting in place for the building. We need to have some discussions about that with all the schools, and so those are some of the things I would like to see. And thinking about long-term goals as well for special education, you know, which the Director of Student Services does report to the superintendent. So I'd like to have a better understanding of what goals we're setting as a district for special education and how we are meeting those goals.
I think for the first meeting after the election, I would like to see definitely another update on the Green Meadow with some, I'm hoping, some good updates about where we are with what has been done, what the Green Meadow Futures Committee has suggested, and how far from that list that they gave us, how far have we gotten through it. I think that's really important. I'm hoping that we'll have some goals, the evaluation. So part of the plan is to have specific training for the goals this summer, and I'm hoping that that will be able to really kind of dig into that and have an actual discussion on and figure out what we need to do to move our district forward. And then I also would like to hear an update on where we're at with the search for a new principal at Green Meadow. I think that, you know, making sure that we have a good committee in place to search and to find the best candidate is a high priority, especially with where we're at, since that will be for the leadership for the whole building. And then we definitely need a budget update too.
Thank you, Leslie.
We've heard loud and clear from teachers, from paraeducators, and from many parents in town that they lack trust in our current superintendent. And he is our current superintendent. We have not yet heard a plan from him on how he's going to restore and rebuild trust in our schools and in our school administration. So that's the first thing that I would want to do. I would want to hear from him on what is that plan to rebuild trust so that we can hold him accountable at our school committee meetings to that plan for rebuilding trust. So that's the first thing that I would want to do. I've raised some tough questions. I've looked at a lot of data. I've posted about it in my 30 days, 30 posts over the last couple of weeks. So there's several things in there that I think our school committee needs to dig into. Things like why students are leaving the district. What are the things that Maynard is not offering? Or what are things that they are leaving Maynard because of? So we know that our kids have choices to go to a lot of different schools. Some of them are going because of what those other schools offer, but I've heard from too many families that they are leaving something in Maynard, or that there's something that Maynard didn't offer them. So I wanted to dig into some of those things and ask our school administration to dig into some of those things and give us an update on how are they addressing some of those. Certainly, as we are getting to the end of the year, I want to take a hard look at the goals that were laid out for the superintendent, the realities that we faced over the past year, and look at our evaluation process, look at that superintendent rubric, and how are we going to write that end of the year evaluation so that he knows that these are the areas that we want to see him grow, assuming that he'll be here in the future. And then finally, as we get to the end of the year, there's a lot to celebrate in our student accomplishments. I would love to see more student celebrations happening at our school committee meetings. The accomplishments, the awards, all the great things that our students are doing, and I would love for that to be a regular part of our meetings.
Okay, so now we'll move on to closing statements, and we'll start with Ms. Tasha.
So I really appreciated this opportunity and have learned a lot through this election process. And part of what amazes me is the great engagement different families have, and parents and even non-families, just community members, to improve our district going forward. I mean, it impacts all residents. And the school budget is the biggest cost for our town. So how can it not be important for everybody? And so I wanted to make sure the emphasis is on how can we move forward, right? How can we have conversations about improving our district in a productive way that brings all stakeholders to the table, and that we are open-minded to understand the perspectives of everyone. I want to make sure that we have a school committee that is regularly seeking out feedback from our community through surveys, through engagement, through discussions, maybe having office hours, coffees, opportunities that will allow us to be able to connect. I mean, we're Maynard. We have such an amazing opportunity that we are able to see our elected officials at the grocery store or wherever, getting coffee, and so we have a lot a lot of opportunity there to engage with our community. So I think that on the reverse, we need to be able to understand that difficult questions are okay, and how do we improve as a community. So I just ask that is something that I would like to bring to our school committee, a different view, being able to ask certain firm questions, seeking data, will not take things at their face value, I never have. And I would hope that you vote for me on May 7th, so thank you.
I'd like to thank the Aspet Valley Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity to come out tonight, and WAVM with all the great equipment and all the great work that they do all the time with this, and also our school committee meetings. And I want to thank those that have supported me throughout my my service and my campaign. It's greatly appreciated. Some of the goals that I'd like to pursue as a member of the school committee is transparent communication and responsibility standards throughout our whole district. To continue in the co-liaison CPAC role, the evaluation process for the superintendent to be more transparent and set clear goals. Long-term goals for our district and input from all of our constituents. The budgetary process, which includes input from school councils and teachers, along with the town working together. Over the last few years, I've fostered good relationships with the different members of our school community. I think that puts me in a great position to keep collaborating on improvements in the areas that we are underperforming and better the areas that we already do well in. With your vote for me on May 7th, I will work hard to make sure that our teachers are supported, our parents are heard, and all our students thrive. Thank you for your support, and I look forward to working with you to make our district a place where all students can learn and become well-rounded and independent citizens.
I want to again thank everyone who made tonight possible, and to everyone for coming out and for asking some really great questions. I want to thank you for the thoughtful questions and for the respectful, productive conversation that we've had about the issues facing our schools. We have some really smart kids. We have some passionate educators. We have good resources. We have a supportive community. We have innovative programming. And we can be the best small district in Massachusetts. But we need to be doing much better. We can have schools that prepare our kids to be active and engaged citizens in our community. I want our kids to be culturally competent in our increasingly diverse global society. I want all our students to leave Maynard High School with the critical thinking, the communication, and the collaboration skills, and the confidence that they need for a productive, fulfilling life. I want to hold our administration to a high standard and demand the results our community and our kids deserve. I know what that high standard looks like. I have the experience, the expertise, and the vision to get us there. I want to work on what's wrong without losing sight of what's right in our schools. This election is about our entire school district. It's about restoring trust in our administration. It's about having open and honest conversations about our problems, not to assign blame, but so that we can all come together for solutions. It's about healing divides in our community and about being inclusive. It's about communication and transparency, about making sure everyone has a voice in our schools. It's about vision and direction, leadership and collaboration. I have the experience, the vision, and the leadership we need to make Maynard the best little district in Massachusetts, and I respectfully ask for your vote on May 7th.
So tonight, I think you've each been given just a brief snapshot of what we stand for, who we are possibly as people, our personalities, the way we address things, and a little bit about our experiences. I would encourage you to reach out to each of us, because there's a whole lot more to each candidate than what was presented here tonight. And I think that in making your decision about who to vote for in this election is you need to consider how things have been done in the past and what you want to see happen in the future. You need to consider the fact that a lot of issues came to a head this year, and we have a great opportunity to reconvene and reassess where we are and where we want to go. And we need to have new perspectives and new voices on the school committee. And I think that once you get to know each of us, the choice is clear as to where an independent and new voice is going to come from. And therefore I ask for your vote on May 7th to be your voice of change. Thank you.
Okay. I hope that you've enjoyed this evening and found the session informative. Again, thanks to all of our volunteers, especially our timekeepers here who've done a magnificent job. Our democracy depends on citizen involvement, and so I'm pleased to see that you're all here tonight. Please let your friends and relatives know what you've heard here tonight, and to be sure to encourage them to vote on Tuesday, May 7th. I would like all the candidates to stand here, and all of us give a hearty round of applause